afternoon. Welcome to the March 7, 2013 meeting of the meeting. At this time, Ms. Boston, would you please lead us in the board prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, Ms. Boston. Ms. Thompson, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Beck. Mr. Barrows.
Aye.
Ms. Epps.
Present.
Ms. Eubanks.
Here.
Ms. Fellows.
Here.
Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Ms. Waller.
Present.
Ms. Ahmed.
Present.
Ms. Boston.
Present.
Mrs. Jacobs.
Here. Thank you. Colleagues, prior to adoption of the agenda, please note the following. Item 5.8, which is Senate Bill 851, creation of a state debt, Prince George's County, lend by a statute at Northwestern High School, has been removed from the legislative agenda. Item 7.3, which is the approval of the Race to the Top Public Charter Schools Replication and Expansion Project, has also been deleted from the consent agenda. Item 7.4, a memorandum of understanding for the box office project at Bowie Center for the Performing Arts, has been added to the consent agenda. Colleagues, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda for March 7, 2013 as amended?
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that we approve the agenda as amended. All in favor? Aye. Any objections or abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passed. Colleagues, please, may I have a motion to approve the board meeting minutes for the January 29, 2013 budget work session?
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that we approve the minutes for the budget work session, which was on January 29, 2013. All in favor? Aye. Any objections or abstentions?
Abstain.
May I please have, thank you, noted. May I please have a motion to approve the February 13 emergency legislative agenda minutes, the February 21, 2013 board meeting minutes? So moved. Thank you, Ms. Boston. It's been properly moved and second to approve the minutes as stated. All in favor? Any objections? Abstentions?
I wasn't here for the 13th, so I didn't want to say yes.
I had to separate both of them. Oh, you were here for one but not the other?
Yes.
Okay. Separating the, all in favor for February 13th, say aye. Aye. Objections? Abstentions? February 21st, approval? Aye? Aye. Objections? Abstentions? Okay. You noted? Thank you. Colleagues, may I please have, did you get that on the record? You got your date?
I did the 21st.
You got yours? Okay.
Yes.
All right, thank you. At this time, we're going to actually have a news break entitled Reading Between the Lines on Dr. Seuss's Birthday.
How was it?
Yummy.
Yummy?
Yummy. Hey. Good.
Well, they didn't look all that appetizing. The green eggs and ham served up recently at University Park Elementary School to commemorate Dr. Seuss's birthday and Read Across America Day were actually a big hit. In fact, reading never tasted so good. With plenty of green food dye on hand, parent volunteers whipped up and served the suspect-looking breakfast. As a teacher, dressed as the Cat in the Hat, read Seuss's familiar tale of the stubborn Sam I Am. All to the delight of children who knew the story by heart.
I would not like them here or there. I would not like them. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them. Sam, I am.
We read so many Dr. Seuss books, and we prep the students by letting them know the importance of reading. I mean, at this stage, so early in their life, they really get in tune with words that rhyme and things that sound funny and things that are just cute. So Dr. Seuss really does that, and this is a great way to start off the Read Across America March month.
The tribute to all things Seussical at University Park that included characters like Thing 1 and Thing 2, and cupcakes decorated like the Lorax's Trafula trees, was just one of many celebrations of the written word that occurred throughout Prince George's County on March 1st. At Laurel Elementary School, board member Sabrina Epps charmed an audience of first graders with her reading of Seuss's Happy Birthday to You.
You hear a soft swoosh in the brightening sky. You're not all awake, but you open one eye. Then over the housetops and trees of Catrue, you see that bird coming to you, just to you.
With Seuss books part of so many Americans' early childhood memories, the chance for adults to relive those clever stories with their fantastic jing-tinglers and star-belly sneetches is a golden opportunity to pass along that sense of wonder about what reading can do.
If you've never been born, well then what would you be? You might be a fish, or maybe a big tree.
I remember reading The Cat in the Hat when I was little. It was one of my favorite books. I would read it over and over and over again. I still get very excited even when the books have been made into movies. I love the fact that it helped me to understand words a lot better. And I think that, it's nice that Dr. Seuss's legacy lives on and allows children an opportunity to read and learn words in a fun and exciting way.
If Dr. Seuss was the star of Read Across America Day, so too were those like Miss Epps who brought his words and those of other writers to life. At the Margaret Brent Special Center in New Carrollton, Washington Redskin wide receiver Joshua Morgan not only brought and read books, all donated by FedEx, but he did so much more. For with 90% of Brent's challenge youngsters nonverbal and often forced to read between the lines, their chance to read Joshua's smile and body language was a joy unto itself.
The team gives everyone real football equipment to wear so we don't get hurt.
What is it that these young people meant to you today? They seem to really enjoy hearing you read to them. What was it like for you?
It's cool, man. It's real humbling and, I don't like to hear myself talk, so to see that they like to hear me talk, it's a great thing that I could come and do that for these kids.
Reading is a huge part of our program. A lot of our students read with what are called picture communication symbols, which is a picture that represents a word. A lot of our students communicate that way.
For athlete Joshua Morgan, who enjoys autobiographies and was encouraged to read by his father, reading is a skill he continues to hone and value.
Why is reading important? I mean, you're a professional athlete, and yet reading is fundamental for everybody.
Yeah, that's the first thing they teach you at elementary school. Reading's fundamental for everybody, but it just, keeps your mind fresh, I think, always. Keeps your mind fresh, keeps your vocabulary up, and just keeps you interested in learning, honestly. That's what it does for me, so I hope that's what it does for everybody else.
Of course, when the words on a page come to life, as they did at University Park, reading can sometimes become, let's say, an acquired taste.
Do you like green eggs and ham? Oh, he said no. Do you think the teacher likes it?
I don't know.
Let's
Should
find
I try?
out. Let's
Ready?
find out.
Count to 3. 1, 2, 3. They're so good. They're so good. You should try. You can be like Sam I am and try.
I'm scared.
Have no fear. Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham, like other books that take us to places we've never been and stir our emotions, will continue to become special memories for a new generation and last a lifetime. This is Dave Zarin reporting.
Congratulations, Ms. Epps, for that wonderful job reading to our students and your participation. Good afternoon again. The board wants to welcome officially Ms. Tiffany Parker and Ms. Thea Wilson to the administrative team of the board office. Please join us in welcoming those staff. On March the 1st, from Rosersville, Marlton, Melwood, James Ryder Randall, and Francis T. Evans Elementary Schools came together for a Maryland State Assessment pep rally. Nearly 1,000 students filled the Frederick Douglass High School gymnasium to capacity, dressed colored in T-shirts according to grade level. Among the invited guests were the Washington Redskins cheerleaders and G-Man, the Washington Wizards mascot. Also on March 1st, several board members, along with Prince George's County Public School students, celebrated the birthday of the beloved children's author, Dr. Seuss, by participating in the annual Read Across America, which is often sponsored by our Teachers Union, PGCEA. Prince George's County Public School students from Gwynn Park and Bowie High Schools joined more than 100 students from the metropolitan area at the 22nd annual Blacks at Microsoft Minority Student Day on February the 15th. Students who aspire to learn more about technology had the opportunity to explore different job functions and opportunities at Microsoft. They also got an inside look at the company and met Microsoft employees. Students also entered Microsoft's essay contest that awards 10 grand prizes. 6 of the 10 winners were from Gwynn Park High School: Brandon Price, Terrell Hawkins, Dontello Kelly, Roselle Kingwood, Ashley Seegers, and Jade Talley. Congratulations to them. The prizes were a laptop, an Xbox 360 bundle with Kinect, and Beats by Dre Studio headphones. Big deal. Congratulations to the 15-member team of students from Kenmore Middle School who placed in the top 5 and won 3 awards in the 2012-2013 National Engineers Week Foundation's Future City National Finals. This year's competition theme was Rethink Runoff. It was focused on managing stormwater pollution. Student teams designed virtual cities with SimCity 4 software, researched and wrote a solution to an engineered problem, wrote a narrative describing their city, and presented their ideas before a panel of judges. Kenmore proceeded to the finals in Crystal City, Virginia, this week after winning the Mid-Atlantic Region competition in January. Thierno Diallo, a senior at Duval High School, represented Prince George's County by winning a first state title and completing an undefeated senior season at the Maryland Public Secondary Schools Athletic Association Wrestling State Tournament. Congratulations. Teacher William Safford, adapted physical education teacher at Francis Scott Key Elementary, has been selected for the Youth and Education Committee for the Professional Disc Golf Association. The Youth and Education Committee creates governing policy that guides youth competition and education programs. Please join me for a moment of silence. Tania Price, second grader at Judge Savannah Woods Elementary School. Deja Price, fifth grader, Judge Savannah Woods Elementary School. Patrice Price, 4-year-old sibling of Tania and Deja Price. Darrell Price, father of Tania and Deja and Patrice Price. Barbara Kidwell, secretary, Eleanor Roosevelt High School. Lovett Hunt, food and nutrition, Northwestern High School. Frank Disharoon, building service, auto maintenance, plumbing. Iris Gilbert, paraprofessional, Glenridge Elementary School. Mildred Eaton, paraprofessional, Forestville High School. Janice Robinson, former council member of Laurel. Thank you for that moment of silence. Our prayers will continue with their families. For upcoming events, please do go to the website, click on subscribe to get updated activities of the school system. On March the 12th, 2013 at 6:30, the board will have an awards program at Laurel High School. We have a board meeting scheduled for March 21st, an evening meeting at 7:05. If you wish to speak at a meeting, please register 2.5 hours prior to the meeting time, and you may call 301-952-6115. We will have further announcements before the end of the meeting. At this time, I yield to Dr. Crawley for the interim superintendent's report.
Thank you, Board Chair Jacobs. Good afternoon, everyone. As you know, this week, students in grades 3, 5, and 8 are taking the Maryland School Assessments, or as we call them, the MSAs, during the school day. With a primary focus on increasing student achievement, we look forward to continuing the trend of rising achievement for all of our students. I'd like to thank parents for helping students perform their best by sending them to school each day well-rested and well-fed with a healthy breakfast. As you know, studies show that children who get adequate sleep and a nutritious breakfast have the energy that they need to do well during the school day. On February 21st, the Prince George's County Board of Education voted to approve a $1.7 billion budget for our fiscal year 2014 operating budget. The budget is designed to invest in student needs as well as continue the long-term process of building fiscal stability. It represents a 1.7% increase over the fiscal year 2013 budget and reflects an increase in appropriations to support negotiated compensation improvements, student-based budgeting increases, and allocations to support the Transforming Neighborhoods initiative. T&I will provide much-needed support for a number of our schools, including truancy, parent engagement, after-school and summer bridge programs, and reading and mathematics interventions for targeted grades. Key priorities for the fiscal year 2014 budget includes providing additional funding for the district's student-based budgeting process, continuing to invest in innovative instructional programs, such as our middle college program, where we will increase that program by an additional 100 students, charter schools, our secondary school reform, visual and performing arts, and alternative education. Restoring compensation programs to help the district recruit and retain highly effective teachers and staff, providing a safe and secure environment for students and staff, and supporting school technology. I would like to thank parents and community members for their valuable input throughout the budget development process, and I am confident that this budget supports the needs of our students and families. I'd like to extend congratulations to Cora Rice and University Park Elementary School, who won the latest round in the Science Bowl semifinals. These schools will go on to compete against Glenarden Woods and Bond Mill Elementary Schools on April 16th to determine the 2013 Elementary School Science Bowl champion. On March 26th, 4 middle school teams, Hyattsville, Greenbelt, Kenmore, and Samuel Ogle, will compete against one another. The winner of this round will be named the 2013 Middle School Science Bowl champion. I'd like to extend good luck to all of our Science Bowl teams in the final round. Although the enrollment window is nearly closed, some Prince George's County public schools, specialty programs, and public charter schools are still accepting applications for the 2013-2014 school year. Please visit our website for details. Also, the window for requesting a student transfer for next year ends on March 22nd. Applications can be submitted in person to the Office of Student Records and Transfers located at the Oxon Hill Staff Development Center, or email to student.transfers@pcgcps.org. Visit our website for details. There are only 2 weeks left to nominate your favorite teacher for the highest honor in the state, the Maryland Teacher of the Year Award. The winner will be a spokesperson for education and will go on to compete for the title of National Teacher of the Year. The deadline is March 22nd, so visit our website soon for more information and to download a brochure and application. I am proud to announce that the Prince George's County Public Schools Excellence in Education Foundation is offering new scholarships for PGCPS graduating seniors this year: a superintendent scholarship, leadership scholarship, and community service scholarship. Visit our website for details to download the application. So this is a special invitation to our seniors to apply for these scholarships. This weekend, from March 8th through the 10th, the PGCPS Science Department will host the Prince George's Area Science Fair at Prince George's Community College. Student winners from schools throughout the county will compete at the county level for prizes and awards. Visit our website for a schedule of events and join in the fun. And so I would like to take this opportunity to continue to thank our students for all of the hard work that they're doing each and every day to grow and learn in special ways. I'd also like to thank the staff for their continued efforts to support rising student achievement. And I'd also like to thank our parents for sending their child to us each and every day, trusting that they will be provided a quality education experience. And so as we move into March to do our work as a school system, a special thanks to our PGCPS family. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Crowley. Chair yields to Ms. Eubanks for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Chair. In reference to the lives that left us too early from the family that lived in Glenarden, Maryland, which also had 2 students, and the third was going to be attending there, to the Price family. I just wanted to make sure that we as a system send a special condolence and our prayers and thoughts being with them. I cannot imagine being a mother and a wife that over half my family was taken so unexpectedly and so quickly. And I just wanted to say that, and I would like to give a special thanks. In times like this, we realize how important community really is. And I am thankful that I was a part of it and I was there for the service. And I also got to see how everybody bonded together for this family. It was a real blessing to be a part of. I would like to first thank Pastor John Jenkins of the First Baptist Church of Glenarden for allowing it to be there. And it's wonderful that a large church did that, because that's the only way that people would have been held, because there was no room. And that was a wonderful thing for the family. And I'm sure with this time that they're going through, that seeing so many people come together for you makes a bad situation easier to deal with. And for the chief of the fire department, Chief Bejor, and I would like to say as well, and I was at another event where he was, we can't forget how important it is to check our smoke detectors and to make sure that every one we know has a working smoke detector, especially when you're talking about people with children and people with elderly who are just doing so much they may not think about it. And I just wanted to take a few minutes and say that, and there are others I can thank, but I just wanted to say something as the board member for that area, but first off, as a mom and a parent. Thank everybody for coming together for this family.
Thank you, Ms. Eubanks. At this time, colleagues, we do not have registered speakers for today, and I'm going to call forth Mr. Lucci for the legislative agenda. Mr. Lucci.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Education. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon in Upper Marlboro. Tomorrow is exactly 1 month until the end of this year's session of the Maryland General Assembly. That means only 30 days, but who's counting? The best news to present to you is that the legislation on net taxable income to increase the amount of money that should justifiably be coming to Prince George's County through the Bridge to Excellence law is moving through the system. It's got a unanimous vote out of the Education Subcommittee of the Ways and Means Committee, and all indications are looking very good for this long-awaited reform that is needed for school funding. You have a number of matters on your legislative agenda, and let me advise to you that matters 5.1 and 5.2 are still not moving. In fact, I think they're going to be withdrawn, both bills, and so I don't believe there's a need to take a position on either one of those. That would take us then to House Bill 855, the Student Health and Fitness Act. This bill was introduced last year, and no vote had ever been taken on it. It's a very well-meaning bill, but it requires 150 minutes of physical education for kindergarten through grade 5 per week, and it's my understanding that just the resources are just not there for that, even though it's a very well-meaning goal. The Maryland Association of Boards of Education opposes this bill. I understand the superintendent opposes this bill, and I recommend that you oppose this bill.
Ms. Beck?
Move to oppose.
Is there a second? Second. It's been properly moved and second that we oppose House Bill 855. Discussion? Ms. Fellows?
You had indicated that it will require 150 minutes for kindergarten. How does that align with the American Association for Physical Education and Dance? Does it align with national standards for kindergarten to take physical education?
I'm afraid I have no idea. I don't know the answer to that.
Ms. Epps?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Lucci, is there any part of the in the research that actually comes from the medical community to support? Because the medical standard, as I understand it, is 30 minutes a day.
I mean, the bill hasn't had its hearing yet, and so all the folks have not yet weighed in, and there's no fiscal note yet. The hearing is next week, the 13th, and so a lot of this information that normally would be available is not available. The problem is, of course, there's a lack of gym capacity in K through 5 in this school district, and that's unfortunate, but it's a huge fiscal burden to remedy that.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Ms. Thompson, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Barrows?
Aye.
Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
Abstain.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller?
Aye.
Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Mrs. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Next, you have before you House Bill 926, County Boards of Education Spending Reporting Requirements. As you know, there are a lot of accountability requirements that the board must satisfy with both the Maryland State Department of Education as well as the U.S. Department of Education. And this bill would require similar information, but in a different format that has not been given. They want to have federal, state, and local aid per school, per student. And that information is not maintained right now by the school district, nor by any school district in the state, and would require a lot of extra work and extra IT work, when in fact there's a lot of accountability right now between the county and the state and the county and the federal government. And so that's why the Maryland Association of Board of Educations and Dr. Crowley and I recommend that you oppose this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Colleagues, is there a motion?
I move to oppose this bill. This is HB 926-13.
Thank you. It's been properly moved and seconded that we oppose House Bill 926-13. Discussion? Hearing none, call the roll, Ms. Thompson, please.
Mrs. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Barrows?
Aye.
Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
I'm abstaining.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller? Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Mrs. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Now, the next bill, House Bill 1026, here's a bill, after we're finally getting net taxable income to take back the aid that we deserve, here's a bill to aim to grab some of our aid. By having part of the average daily attendance being taken in March instead of September when there's a drop-off. Now, this bill has not yet been given a fiscal note, but I can guarantee you it's a negative fiscal note for Prince George's County the way it's designed, and so I urge you to oppose this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Colleagues, is there a motion?
Move to oppose HB 1026.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second to oppose House Bill 1026. Any discussion? Questions? Ms. Thompson, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Barrows?
Aye.
Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
Aye.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller? Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Mrs. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Now, the next two matters are the same exact bill, just the House and Senate version, so I don't know whether you want to have a joint motion or however you want to handle this, but it's regarding due process hearings for children with disabilities and the burden of proof. And as you know, the burden of proof means who has to prove that there is a need for out-of-school district accommodations, whether it's the parent on the student's behalf or the school district. And this bill would essentially turn the current process upside down. Right now, if you want to get the extra services, you don't believe that you've been treated fairly, the first two steps of the system with mediation, that you can go and hire a lawyer and provide information why you should have extra accommodations for being in a non-public placement. This bill would require the school system to prove the opposite, why you should not be eligible. And it's always much harder to prove a negative than it is to prove a positive. And it's going to result in a lot more expense for the school district with these types of non-public placements, because whether we reverse the burden of proof, that will be a natural result of that. And so Maryland Association of Boards of Education opposes this bill, so does PSAM, the Principals Association, the superintendent opposes it, and I recommend that you oppose these two bills as well.
Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Mr. Barrows?
Yeah, Mr. Lucci and colleagues, I see all of this opposition to the bill from the superintendent, the principals group, our lobbyists, and also me. But as I read this bill, I think about my own family. I think about several families that I've encountered over my course on the board. And if this was a perfect world, a perfect school system, there would be no need for this bill, but it's not. We have some individuals, in the school system that are strongly opposed to granting students that need IEPs. They would much rather them just have the 504 or do anything. I've talked to countless parents. I know this to be true because it happened, in my own family. Do anything not to get that IEP. Very adult-centered focus, because the IEP, I guess, requires more work, different classification. I'm not sure what the issue is, but there are children in our school system who are hurting, or across the state. This is not just a Prince George issue, who are legitimately hurting. They need IEPs. And because the burden is placed on the parent, parents have to go out and pay, whether it's Children's Hospital or GW or some other place to conduct these tests. And when we have 60% or more of our students on free and reduced lunch, not every parent can afford to do that, or not every parent knows to do that. And so what I fear is that we have students that we're losing in the cracks, students that could greatly benefit from IEP that's currently not getting one. And that's happening not just in Prince George, but that's happening all throughout the state. I believe if the burden of proof was on the school system, we would be able to do that. I realize there's a cost to it, but I do believe that the cost of not getting our students the services that they need far outweighs the cost that, the burden of proof would put on the school system. So, colleagues, I kind of feel like I know where the stars are aligned on this one, so I'm not going to make a motion to support it. But I would urge you to, if nothing more, let's think about as a body how to make sure that our students with disabilities are served, or what rights parents have. How do we educate parents to let them know what to do? I mean, I know of countless examples, like I said before, of parents who strongly feels that their child has a disability, needs an IEP, but they get the complete runaround at the school always, and they have to go out and buy, purchase, work with the doctor, and with 60% of our students on free and reduced, it's just not a good. If this was a perfect world, perfect school system, we wouldn't need this bill, but unfortunately it's not. So I would just ask my colleagues, even if this is just for us to start the conversation about what to do, even if we don't want to go with this bill, we do need to start the conversation. We do have to figure it out, because we are losing students every year.
Ms. Beck?
Is there a fiscal note on this?
We don't have it yet, but I'm sure it will be huge.
And I agree with my colleague, Mr. Burrows. I've also heard from special ed families who have concerns about how to break through the wall of special ed to get the services that they need. And I think that's the genesis of this bill.
I understand. I mean, I am a father in a special ed family, and I can tell you that the responses we've gotten from going to each level through the school system, that the employees there have just been wonderful and caring and helpful and understanding. But I understand that that's not maybe the case with all parents, but there does exist the Maryland Disabilities Law Center provides free assistance to attorneys, to families that can't, that need the help and do help families navigate the system, because it is a very detailed system. And my daughter came home with notes saying, please support this bill. And I had a whole conversation with the folks there just how it would open up their floodgates, and they wouldn't be able to sustain the need if they had done that, and if that came through.
And I do agree that this bill could serve as a conversation starter. The fiscal note on it has me very worried, but I think in the interim that the board probably needs to be more involved in our special ed cases so that we know we're not part of the background to this type of legislation. We were a special needs family as well, and we did not have the same positive response that you did. And we could not get a law firm a pro bono law firm to represent us in our case. So, and that was 20 years ago. So I'd like to know that we've made progress. But when you see legislation like this, and you hear from the advocates, especially the ones in CCAC, which is a legislatively created body, I think that that while I will have to vote no, while I will have to sustain the opposed recommendation on this only because of the unknown about cost, it does raise my antenna that this is an issue that we need to be focused on prior to next year when probably the same bill will come up. Thank you.
I'm going to yield to Dr. Crawley, and then I have Ms. Fellows and Ms. Ahmed.
Thank you. I think the conversation that we're having is an important conversation because it goes back to the provision of services that are provided for our students with disabilities and their eligibility and how parents are supported along the way to make sure that students are getting what they need. And certainly the centerpiece of that requirement is the individual education plan and making sure that if students are eligible for specialized instruction, that they are afforded an IEP, and that IEP is implemented with fidelity, and that there are clear outcomes, and that parents are partners, that they are engaged in the process. And I think what this bill does is it raises the awareness of the importance of that process and the integrity of that process across the state. And so while I did not support the bill because I think that there are procedural safeguards in place as it relates to the process, and part of that is to try to resolve issues at the local school level, and then there's a mediation process, and then a more formal administrative proceeding, which is a due process. We know that the majority of cases are resolved at the school and mediation level, and so the last resort is to go to due process and to engage in a legal proceeding. I think that not only is it costly, but it also impacts relationships between schools and parents. And so I would say that certainly as a school district, we're going to continue to look at the integrity of our process and to make sure that students are getting what they need in the IEP process. Mr. Barrows talked about outside evaluations. Part of the law is that students or parents are entitled to an independent educational evaluation when there's a disagreement. Again, making sure that we're implementing the legal proceedings associated with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So I just wanted to put out there that this is work that we need to do and to continue to do as a school system to make sure that our students with disabilities are getting the services that they need, and to do it in a way that is cost effective for both parties.
Ms. Fellows?
Seeing that one of the sponsors is one of our delegates here in Prince George's County, I wanted to know what was the rationale? Was there some data collected that would precipitate this bill, whether it be statewide or countywide, on parents who were trying to access, whether it be testing or accessing the program for their child?
The information that I've seen, and I've only seen it because I am a parent, is from an organization called MANSEFT. I don't know what it stands for, but that's the primary advocacy organization for this bill. And they don't have statistics. They have plenty of anecdotal information or some particular horror stories in different parts of the state, but no real data in terms of turned down, not turned down, justified, not justified, et cetera, that I've seen.
Ms. Ahmed?
Thank you. I agree with what Board Member Burrows and Ms. Beck had on this issue. I do believe that there is a significant cost involved. However, the IEP, this bill would significantly reduce the burden of parents, and it would ensure that certain students would not be deprived of attaining IEP. And I think in the end, although there is a cost involved, it would be very beneficial for the student, and it would bring their parents and their family some peace of mind. So I will be opposing this as well, or opposing the motion on this.
Ms. Epps? Is there a motion, colleagues? Ms. Higgins, would you? I'm sorry.
Sure, I move to oppose.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and second to oppose House Bill 1286-13 and Senate Bill 691. Further discussion, Mr. Burrows?
Dr. Crowley, I just would like to, we talked about it, but I'd like to see some follow-up regarding special ed and what we're doing. Maybe a specialized meeting around it where we can talk about these issues and also have other stakeholders present. There are a lot of great people in the school system, and every time it gets to, Dr. Arbogast's level is fixed, everything's fine. But there's so many parents that don't know how to navigate, this bureaucracy. And I'm on the school board, and the first time I'm hearing about the Maryland Disabilities Law Center is now, right? So not a lot of people know about it. So it's important that every parent with a student that's disabled know about all of their resources, and they have, a clear picture of their rights and what they can do, not just, some. And so I would really like to see a follow-up meeting or follow-up action to really explore what we need to do as a district and what we can do as a board to support those efforts.
Certainly, we would be happy to come back to you with some type of presentation and discussion around special education. Just a couple of things. This week, staff and I had an opportunity to meet with the chair of the Special Ed Advisory Committee for Prince George's County, along with some other parents representing PTAG, who had students who were twice exceptional. And it was a really good discussion. And yesterday, although it did not happen because of the snow, we had arranged to have a focus group of teachers who are working with students with disabilities. And the purpose of bringing that group together was to take a look at the things that we think are working well in our school district, the things that we had concerns about in terms of challenges in the provision of services, and then some recommendations of, how can we be better? How can we get better at our work and make sure that we're engaging our parents at higher levels and making sure that students are getting what they need in the provision of special ed services. So we are rescheduling that meeting, but I'm hoping that there will be some recommendations that will come out of that meeting that will inform the work that we're doing district-wide. The goal is also to have similar conversations with the parents of students with disabilities to get their perception. And as we can just hear from this group, people have had varying experiences in the special ed process. So we will continue to do this work, and as a part of it, we'll bring back some of that discussion to the board.
Thank you. And please make sure that a part of your recommendations focus on access. Not just the service and level of service, but the access, and also, what schools are following the process, what schools are not, and what we're doing to make sure that, all schools and all parents receive, the access that they need. Thank you.
Ms. Boston.
I too have experience, firsthand experience on this matter, because I have a family member that has been going through this process for the last 13 years, and we're presently still going through. So it is, and I agree. It is a grueling process, and it's something that you have to do yearly. It's not just you do it at the beginning of your child enters school. It's something that you have to stay on, and I don't think that process should be that grueling. So I mean, once you establish an IEP, I mean, it's something that I feel that the school systems should make sure that that process is followed. One of the biggest things that I see that we have a problem with, and you might want to address this when you meet with your groups, is that a lot of our teachers, our regular teachers, do not understand the process for IEP and how to follow it. I mean, I've had discussions with you about that before, but that is one of the biggest problems I think we have, and not having qualified teachers, certified teachers that are teaching our special need kids. That is a big issue when we have long-term subs that are in those classes, and I think they are missing out on their right to get the best education they can possibly get. So that is one thing that I hope when you have this discussion that you look at that big picture, try to make that process a lot easier for parents to have to deal with these type of issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Boston. Ms. Thompson, call the roll, please.
Mrs. Beck?
Aye.
Mr. Barrows?
No.
Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
Abstain.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller?
Aye.
Ms. Ahmed?
No.
You said no? No. Ms. Boston?
Yes.
Mrs. Jacobs?
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Lucci?
Now, your board policies with regard to legislation acknowledge that sometimes things happen so quickly in Annapolis that my items might need to be added to your agenda that were not on the earlier notice. And so I have one of those for you today, House Bill 1073, also known as PG 419. That bill, submitted by Senator Muse in its present form, would require Prince George's County to make a graduation requirement, a year-long financial literacy course, a semester-long financial literacy course to be taught in all Prince George's County high schools. You have before you an amendment drafted that was suggested by the senator, and it may sound familiar to you. If you want, I'll read it so that everyone can hear it. The county board shall develop curriculum content for a hands-on course in financial literacy to be taken by all students in the 8th grade. The curriculum content shall include instruction regarding identification of services provided by financial institutions, debit cards and their uses, interest and credit, savings and investing, the differences among sales, income, and property taxes, and the purpose for each type of tax, the basic principles of Social Security, net monthly income, and household budgeting. The county board shall implement the financial literacy curriculum content in every middle school in the county. And if it sounds familiar, because it's almost directly what you've already done with the Junior Achievement Program with the financial literacy house, and that will be started this fall. So the question is, does the board wish to rescind its opposition to the unamended bill and support a bill that would have this amendment attached to it?
Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Ms. Higgins?
Yes, I think I would like to make a suggestion in terms of language. Instead of to be taken by, to be all students in the 8th grade, to be offered for all students in the 8th grade, if that's acceptable. I guess I move to make that change, Madam Chair.
So if I hear, so it would read, the county board shall develop curriculum content for a hands-on course in financial literacy to be offered to all
offered
students?
To, yes, thank you.
In the 8th grade?
Right preposition.
That was a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there a second? Second. It's been properly moved in second. We haven't even gotten to whether we're going to approve it or not, but language to discuss. It's been properly moved and second that the language in the first paragraph read as I just stated. Any discussion on that? All in favor of that change?
Aye.
Objections? Abstentions? Okay. I have, were you done, Ms.
I was going to make the other motion, but I can wait.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. I move that we accept the bill as amended and recommended by Mr. Lucci.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second that we take the recommendation of amending this bill accordingly. Ms. Beck, and then Mr. Burrows. Mr. Burrows.
Just wanted to speak out and support this bill and thank Dr. Arbogast, Dr. Crawley, and your team for laying the foundation for the Junior Achievement Program. I'm extremely excited about it, and I know all of our students will greatly benefit from a program that actually teaches these skills. At the end of the day, our students need to be financially literate before they leave our school system, now more than ever. And because of your hard work and your team's hard work, that's going to be a possibility for them. So I just wanted to thank the administration for their work, thank Mr. Lucci for his work in getting this amendment in.
Any other discussion, questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Beck? Mr. Barrows?
Aye.
Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
I'm abstaining.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller?
Aye.
Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Mrs. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
That is all I have for you today. Thank you very much. I'll see you in 2 weeks for the end of game report.
And it's not likely that we'll be getting anything new coming up, right?
I don't believe so, no. I think you have
Hopefully
it
all
all.
the reports will be what's gone, and what's gone, and what's gone.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lucci. Okay, colleagues, again, that brings us to our next item on the agenda. I yield to Dr. Crawley for discussion item.
Thank you. Our discussion item today is on discipline. And before I turn the presentation over to Mr. Williams, would just like to make a couple of comments. The presentation today will explore 3 essential questions around discipline, and you'll see some comparative data on discipline. And I think in general that the data indicates that we are trending in the right direction, and certainly there are some areas that we need to pay some attention to as a school district. At the state level, there's been extensive discussion about discipline, and there was a proposed change in the discipline regulation, and it went through a lot of discussion. There was a lot of involvement of a number of groups, and then most recently we were informed that that bill was pulled back, or the proposed regulation was pulled back for further study, and it will go to a task force, and that task force will do some additional work. And so we look forward to being able to provide some additional input before it is finalized. And as you know, the impetus for this change in regulation was the disproportionate number of suspensions and some concerns statewide about alternatives to suspension as we look at suspension rates within districts and across the state. And then third, I'd like to say that as a part of this presentation, you'll see some data, but we will also provide the board and our public with some recommendations of things that we need to focus on as a district. And then would like to also acknowledge the work of our Student Services Department and pulling together these data. They have been incorporated as part of our PMAP process. So this is ongoing monitoring and conversation at the executive cabinet level, and it's also having those conversations at the school level as we look at data findings across schools around suspension and what schools are doing to address suspensions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Williams, our Chief of Student Services.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the school board, and Prince George's County community. I'm Darrell Williams, Chief of the Division of Student Services. And with me today, as part of this presentation, is Ms. Janice Briscoe, who will join us at the podium shortly. She is the Special Projects Officer in the Division of Student Services, and Mr. Aaron Price, who is the Supervisor for the Office of Appeals. The mission of the Division of Student Services provides integrated and coordinated services to students who, upon completion of high school, will be able to enter college post-secondary training without remediation, by providing quality information, resources, guidance, and technical assistance to students, parents, system staff, community, and business partners, thereby supporting the effective delivery of services to foster positive social, psychosocial development and student achievement. Our mission is accomplished through the delivery of services through several departments in the division. The division supports the system's objective targets for attendance and student performance through services that support decreasing the suspension rate and reducing the number of out-of-school suspensions to ultimately increase the amount of direct instructional time for students in our schools. This afternoon, staff and I will share data on in-school and out-of-school suspension and expulsions that align with the division's performance measures. Next slide. And as Dr. Crawley mentioned, there are 3 essential questions that will be answered during this presentation. The work in the Division of Student Services helps support safe and supportive schools, which is strategic goal number 3. Our service delivery system is embedded in key indicators, including building supportive learning communities through strong instructional leadership, rigorous, engaging curriculum, organizational structures, including scheduled teams, departments, smaller learning communities, and academies. Systematic approaches through orderly and focused classrooms and classroom management, prevention to improve attendance, reduce aggressiveness, reduce violence, and provide prevention activities around safe and drug-free schools. Social indicators around positive behavior, effective problem solving, and ethics of citizenship. The division supports strategies used in schools to help school staff create safe and supportive learning communities. And the next slide provides a few examples of some of the systematic approaches that we employ to reach goal number 3. I'll highlight for you bullet number 3 for the purpose of this presentation, progressive discipline. And with progressive discipline, we look at the appropriate reactions to disciplinary infractions. That's based on our code of conduct, so that infractions and consequences to infractions do indeed increase based on the severity of those infractions. And our administrators are very much aware that the reactions or the options that they use for discipline really should be corrective and instructive in nature. You'll see a bullet here that identifies alternatives to suspension, And there's a slide later on in the presentation that will show you some of the alternatives that we use here in Prince George's County Public Schools. And I'll just highlight one more: academic continuity. And with that, we want to ensure that any student that is a part of the discipline process, that academic and instructional service does not change as a result of an infraction. So we want to maintain continuity in the services. For the next slide, I'm going to ask Ms. Janice Briscoe, our Special Projects Officer, to come to the podium and discuss some of the data, as well as to outline the discipline definitions that we're using under the Code of Student Conduct.
Good afternoon. The first definition that I will be reviewing is who can suspend. The discipline definitions are defined by COMAR and the State Code of Conduct. The discipline definitions are included in AP 10101, which is our Code of Student Conduct, and it provides a guideline for school-based administrators. So first, who can suspend? Principals at each of our schools, elementary, middle, and high school, after conducting a thorough investigation, talking to the student and any witnesses that may have been present, in alignment with discipline definitions, and they also provide a guideline for our school-based administrators prior to them issuing a suspension. The school-based administrators often confer with members of their administrative team, their pupil personnel worker. They call the Office of Pupil Services or the Office of Appeals. The short-term suspension. Short-term suspensions, the code states that principals can issue a 1 to 5 day suspension. Makeup work must be given to the student within 48 hours. The makeup work is then collected, graded, and recorded. Long-term suspensions are any suspensions that are 6 or more days. Principals request a long-term suspension that is investigated by the pupil personnel worker. A due process hearing is conducted by the PPW with the student, parent, and the school-based team. The number of days is determined at the due process hearing. Makeup work is also given to students that are on long-term suspension within 48 hours. The makeup work for students on long-term suspension is also collected, graded, and recorded for the duration of the suspension. Expulsion request. The principal issues a request for expulsion for the most egregious offenses. The pupil personnel worker investigates the incident, and a due process hearing is conducted by the Office of Appeals with the student, parent, and the school-based team. The length of the expulsion is determined at the hearing based on the offense and the student's age. As Mr. Williams mentioned earlier, we have several alternatives to suspension that are listed for administrators' use on page 4 in our Code of Student Conduct. We recommend to schools during our training and through conversations with administrators a 3-pronged approach to discipline: prevention, intervention, and the use of progressive discipline. We utilize these strategies to encourage positive behaviors and to maximize the time students remain in school and to reduce the number of lost instructional days. I won't mention them all. I'll just give you a few highlights of some of the alternatives that we recommend to school-based teams. Administrator, parent, student conferences before or after school detention. We give students alternative volunteer services. We place students on behavior contracts. We have students participate in community conferencing. We have our counselors have conferences with students, parents, and if there's teachers involved, with the teacher and the student. We also encourage the increased use of in-school suspension. We have parents shadow to come to the school with the student in lieu of the student being removed from the school program. This also allows our parents to have conversation with the teachers or administrators and also assist our parents in seeing what goes on during the school day. We have students referred to the pupil personnel worker. Many of our schools offer Saturday school. Schools refer students to our school instructional team, and we also, of course, encourage schools to continue to conference with students. On page 8, I will begin doing a review of school year 12 and school year 13 comparative data. The data that is being presented is from September through December of each year, and the data represents elementary school, middle school, and high school data. The data that is being presented on page 8 reflects the number of incidents of suspensions for this time period. So let me give you an example so you will understand what that means. Janice Briscoe may have been suspended 1 time. Darrell Williams was suspended 5 times. So he will be counted in 5 times in the number of incidents, while Janice Briscoe will be counted 1 time. So for in-school suspension, school year 13 data reflects a decrease of 365 incidents for those less serious offenses. Schools are using in-school suspension as an alternative, but they're also using detention, AM or PM, depending on the bell schedule of the school, Saturday school, and the other alternatives that I mentioned in the previous slide. Out-of-school suspension for school year 13, and this also includes our request for expulsions, reflects a decrease of 1,012 incidents from school year 13. This is due to the use of alternatives to suspension, the increase in the number of schools that implement PBIS, that's positive behaviors and interventions. We've increased to 93 schools. All of our middle schools are now implementing PBIS. The use of school-based and or community resources to help work with our young people. Again, schools are contacting our office on a daily basis, and we give recommendations relative to the number of days the school should give to a student, and also we give recommendations to alternatives that schools can utilize. We, too, help schools by conducting parent conferences so that we can reduce the number of incidents where students are out of school. So the total of in-school and out-of-school suspensions for the time period of September through December reflects a decrease of 1,377 incidents from school year 12. This slide represents school year 12 and school year 13 comparative data for elementary school, middle school, and high school for the number of students suspended. As stated on slide 8, the number of suspensions decreased. However, there was a slight increase of the number of students suspended. The number of students suspended out of school, and again, this includes the request for expulsion, and as I talk about the long-term suspensions in the next couple of metrics, I'm going to explain why we include the request for expulsions. It increased by 303 students from the same time period last year. And this is because of some of the students in some of our schools, and I'll talk about some of the interventions that we've been utilizing. The number of students suspended out of school, and again, this includes the request for expulsions, the percentage, and it's based on each year's enrollment. The state requires that we look at the percentage of students enrolled. So the percentage of students based on last year's enrollment and this year's enrollment increased by 0.42%. This is due in part to the increase in enrollment from school year 12, and that increase is 1,092 students. So the enrollment from last year to this year increased by 1,092 students, and the percentage of students that were suspended increased by 0.42. The number of students suspended in and out of school increased by 196 school year 13 from the same time period last year. And our goal is to increase the use of in-school suspension. And the reason that we encourage schools to increase the use of in-school suspension is because it allows students to remain in school. We also encourage schools to use in-school suspension for less serious offenses. It also decreases the use of out-of-school suspension, and it helps to reduce the time students are out of school. The number of long-term suspensions, and this is 6 days or more that were processed, increased by 129 students. Now, this increase reflects long-term suspensions that are processed by the pupil personnel workers and those that are processed by the Office of Appeals. Mr. Price is going to share expulsion data with you, and you will see how our expulsions have reduced significantly. And when a principal issues a request for expulsion, once the expulsion is either reviewed or heard by the Office of Appeals, it is either upheld or it is reversed to a long-term suspension. So because of the consultative service and the investigative services that Mr. Price and I collaborate, we have reduced many of the expulsion requests to long-term suspensions. So thus you see the increase in the number of long-term suspensions that are processed. This also minimizes the number of days that students are out of school. The last metric here is the number of instructional days due to suspension that students are out of school. Now, this year we're at 17,813, but we have decreased 6,521 from this same time period, school year 12. This results in a decrease in the instructional time suspended students miss from school, or the time that students are not being involved in the academic program. Ultimately, this will help impact student achievement. School-based administrators, pupil services, and the Office of Appeals are working together to give students fewer days so that students can be in school. So now I'll turn it over to Mr. Price, and you'll see how some of our data integrates through our collaborative efforts.
Thank you. Good afternoon. As previously mentioned, the Office of Appeals works closely with the Office of Pupil Services in dealing with the suspensions and requests for expulsions. The requests for expulsions are, as previously mentioned, those most egregious situations that are referred from the school to the Office of Appeals. And I begin with the several dispositions in which the Office of Appeals can take with regards to a request for expulsion. There are 7 disposition categories to which a referred matter may go. Those different categories are reflected in my next slide, which I will explain in detail. Comparing school year 2012 to school year 2013, this chart shows the requests for expulsion submitted by the various schools. This slide includes middle school as well as the high school. There have been none elementary school requests during this recording period for the 2013 school year. I will have you note that there's a significant difference in the month of September in terms of actual requests received. What's not shown in the slide, which I will proudly present for your information, for the month of September for the school year 2013, of the 22 requests, that resulted in 7 expulsions issued from the Office of Appeals, which may ultimately have been referred to you for final action and on an appeal. For the month of October, of the 65 requests for expulsions, there were 17 actual expulsions. For the month of November, there were 47 requests. In turn, there were 14 actual expulsions. And the month of December, there were 80 requests, resulting in 34 actual expulsions, for a total of 72 students having been expelled for that time period, which is a 33% of the total number of requests received. With regards to the 2013 reporting period, this breakdown shows how those requests were in fact processed by month. And for the month of September, the key figure, as I indicated, were the number of actual students that were expelled. The abeyance process, for your benefit, once we receive a request for expulsion from the school, we have to have that conference. And in this case, the parent and or student were unavailable to come in for their conference, so we have yet to make a final determination that the student would be, in fact, expelled. So those cases are held in abeyance. You've heard with regard to expelled, then the admin transfers. In that instance, a student was transferred from his base school to an alternative school, and that was the disposition in that particular matter. Of serious note are the long-term dispositions. A request for expulsion was received in our office as a result of conducting the hearing and reviewing the investigation conducted by the pupil personnel worker, as well as the information obtained by the pupil personnel workers in the Office of Appeals. It was determined that, as opposed to processing an expulsion as initially requested, the matter would be referred for a long-term suspension, and in most cases, the long-term suspension would include up until the point of that hearing, which would be a time-served type of disposition. Next, we have the manifested out. That's where the matter is referred to the Office of Appeals, and in between the time the matter is heard in the Office of Appeals, a special education IEP team has determined that that the conduct was a manifestation of the disability and that the student should be returned. So that's how that comes out. The non-expellable, that's a situation where a principal makes a request for an expulsion, and on further review of the request, the matter is not an expellable offense. Varied in terms of situations that could be, but per our code, and we do have one of the most strict code in the state, in this instance, that is not an expellable offense. And lastly, the category of rescinded, and that's simply where the principal would rescind his or her request to our office prior to us issuing a determination. What I did not present, which would just be make the slide too small, is what are the heavy hitters for expellable offenses. And just to give you note, our heaviest hitters in order are drugs, number one, assault, including attacks on staff members of the Prince George's County School System, and lastly, group fights. And with that, I leave this information for your consideration.
Thank you, staff. So we just have another slide that shows some of the definitions of the codes that are used in expulsion for you to review so you become familiar with what that process is. Our ultimate goal is to make sure that we're working hard with schools, with principals, with students, and families to increase the instructional time that students spend in school by providing alternatives to the out-of-school circumstances. We provided for you a chart that just gives you some information on gender representation for in-school and out-of-school suspensions for the period of September 2012 through December 2012. So you can just see that breakdown between males and females for in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions. We're beginning to have these conversations with counselors, principals, and staff to develop strategies to decrease the number of male students, particularly, who are experiencing both in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions. The next few slides will share with you some school-based strategies that have been successful as alternatives to out-of-school suspensions for students with misconduct and behavior problems. As mentioned earlier, I just highlight again PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and supports, currently in 93 of our schools. This is a broad range of systemic and individualized strategies for achieving important social and learning outcomes. The goal of PBIS is to create a positive school culture in which pro-social behaviors are explicitly taught and reinforced, and all of our adults respond to the occurrence of problem behaviors in a consistent manner. The next slide just gives you the breakdown in terms of the number of PBIS schools by elementary, middle, high school, and our K-8s and academies and charter. Again, total of 93 schools. On the next slide, we're providing you with just some bullet points of interventions and disciplinary services that are used for students suspended from school. Again, we've talked about some of these in our procedures, where makeup work is provided within a 48-hour time frame. Referrals are made to pupil personnel workers for support. Student behavior is discussed during school instructional team meetings. There are community conferences for mediation, and other alternatives are implemented to support our students who are disciplined for out-of-school suspensions. On these next slides, we're sharing some information. The State Board of Education is currently reviewing the state's Student Code of Conduct, and there are a number of recommendations and work groups that are in place to look at what the state code will be revised to. And so we're just highlighting a few items here for you, just to again, keep you aware of what's happening at the state level. So there's a pending approval, again, that all LEAs will develop a student responsibility and rights document. The document will be distributed to all members of the school community. They're refining some of the administrative or disciplinary actions. The State Board is considering a change to the short-term suspension days and long-term suspension days. Also, the state requires the LEAs to implement a code of conduct, and we have a team together that is reviewing our current code of conduct. We are moving forward with many of the items in our code to ensure that it reflects some of the best practices and best policies and procedures for dealing with student conduct. We will be pushing out, at least to the Executive Cabinet, a draft of what that code will look like, and we are also working to ensure that it's aligned to what we believe would be the state's final code of conduct for students. There are a number of short-term recommendations that we are offering in terms of how we're looking at student discipline, and we want to make sure that we increase the use in terms of consistency of implementing school instructional teams to review student behavior and misconduct, that we utilize response to interventions, supplemental support teams to support our schools. We continue to provide a continuum of educational services to ensure continuity from homework to alternative schools to alternative administrative services. Making changes in school max, we want to ensure that we work closely with the Office of Data Quality to ensure accuracy in how we're reporting discipline data in school max, and to ensure that any change to the module is reflective as we move toward a revised code of student conduct, both at the local level and that which might be impacted by the state code of conduct. Long-term recommendations. We have a discipline review committee that has convened and is working to revise Administrative Procedure 10101, again, the Code of Student Conduct. We have been meeting in opening and closing schools, meetings to anticipate what might be coming forward from MSDE in terms of the new state code of conduct. And the Discipline Review Committee will continue to make recommendations in concert with the new code in order to provide training to principals and staff before the beginning of the 2013-2014 school year. And just another page of recommendations. So at this time, if there are questions, I'll turn it back over to either Dr. Crawley or the chairperson. Okay.
Thank you very much. Dr. Carl, did you have anything to add or questions before we get to deliberations? Okay.
No.
I have Ms. Fellows and Ms. Higgins.
Thank you for your presentation. I have a couple questions. You talked about the PBIS schools. There are several, but not all of our schools are using that model of discipline, correct?
That's correct. We have it in 93 schools.
Okay, so how are those schools doing in comparison to those who are not using this model?
Okay. Janice?
When we look at comparative data from the schools that are implementing PBIS and those schools who are not, it depends on a number of variables, one being how long the school has been implementing PBIS and the fidelity of the implementation in each of our schools. Mr. Moody, oh, he just stepped out. Mr. Moody helps to coordinate along with persons from the Safe and Drug-Free Schools office, and they collect comparative data on office referrals, suspensions, and various other aspects of school discipline to see trends in the schools that are implementing PBIS.
Also, I'd like to look at if we even collect or disaggregate the data, not only by infractions, whether they be major or minor, but teachers and the number of repetition coming from teachers. And so that lets me know if teachers are receiving any kind of supports when it comes to students who are continuing behavioral concerns. Are there any kind of disaggregation of that data to look at teachers and the referrals that they submit based on the infractions so that we know what kind of supports to provide to teachers in the classroom environment?
School-based administrators, especially those schools that are utilizing the SWIS tool to help to monitor discipline statistics in their school buildings, are looking at teacher data and also the time of day data to see when incidents are occurring and if they're occurring in certain classes. Now, when middle schools meet as teams, part of the middle school model is for the teams to discuss student incidents and to talk about the time of day and the classes that students on specific teams that they're seeing a number of increased or a number of infractions. So that's also part of the conversation that middle schools are having during their team meetings.
Okay. On one of your pages, you talked about the alternatives to suspensions. Right here it has peer mediation. Is training offered in those areas? Trainings, and also you talk about school instructional team referral. Who makes up the school instructional team referral?
Administrative Procedure 5124 clearly specifies who should be a part of the school instructional team. Mm-hmm. It's the school-based administrator, teachers, the psychologist assigned to the school, the pupil personnel worker, our professional school counselors. And we had a conversation about school instructional teams yesterday because the purpose of the school instructional team is to address students who are experiencing academic behavior, attendance concerns, and as a team to discuss interventions and a plan of action for those students. So the administrative procedure clearly outlines the team membership as well as procedures that schools should follow.
Okay. For continuity purposes, when you talk about that instructional team, because the student sees more than those individuals, they may have special instructors, so that if there's any kind of disciplinary plan that's put in place, how are the other support staff involved in that? Say, for instance, music, arts, or any other extracurricular that may have some interaction with the children, so there's continuity with the plan that's put in place if a disciplinary plan has to be put in place for intervention and or prevention.
If a discipline plan is put in place, the school captures an action plan on the standard document and template that we utilize for all of our schools, and that plan is to be shared with everyone who that the child interacts with.
Okay.
And the counselor usually helps in ensuring that that plan is shared with all.
How often is it revisited in case that child is still having some difficulty with conforming, or how often is it revisited is it revisited on a monthly, bi-monthly basis, or depending on how the student is doing?
I think what we do in our schools is that we look at case-by-case situations, and the team will determine the frequency of responding to any particular need for reinforcement and continuing to discuss how students are doing. I would hesitate to say that it's a monthly or a weekly, but there is special attention given to behaviors and the recurrence or reoccurrence of those behaviors, and the team discusses those in their regular meetings when they discuss student behavior.
And lastly, is there some type of checklist for when students are suspended? Because in here it says a short-term suspension, 1 to 5 days. It says that a student is given his or her assignments within 48 hours. I know I've had parents who did not experience that, and so it took much longer for them to get their educational packets, and sometimes they had to, had to go to the point where they had to contact me to get that information. So is there a checklist that each school must follow when they are doing short-term, long-term, so that the student is continuing to receive the kind of educational supports when they're at home, whether it be with their educational packets?
In conjunction with the Office of Appeals, we developed a document for schools to document when homework is requested, when it's returned, and when it's been picked up by a parent.
And parents are notified that they have to request, or is that something that they are informed of? Do they have to request a homework packet, or is that something that they're informed that they will receive a packet?
Parents can request, but we are working with schools to ensure that schools understand that this is mandated that to continue educational services, that students receive makeup work within 48 hours. But parents do have to either pick it up or make arrangements with one of the student's peers to bring the work home for the student.
And I thought that was my last question.
And our counselors will continue to work with our schools and our school administrators to ensure that information is provided to families if there's a student that is disciplined, requires out-of-school suspension, that information is provided in a timely manner about assignments, about the kind of work that can be made up, and that they check with teachers to get that those assignments for that student and family.
And just because this is some of the concerns that have been brought to my attention about, once a student returns a packet, there are times when a teacher says that they're not going to count the work towards his or her grade. Is that something that's normally practiced, or, is it just that we may need to have further training with teachers on just these processes?
Yeah, all work should be counted toward how the student is performing. And so if there are incidences where parents have been shared that their child's work isn't counting, then we'll work with school staff and training opportunities so that they'll understand that work is to be counted as part of that student being out of school. So we're still giving them educational services, and that work is to be counted in their the tally of their work.
And as Mr. Williams said, that we work with our schools so that they understand that suspensions are excused absences. So students are offered makeup work, and that makeup work should be graded and recorded as part of the student's quarterly grade.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Higgins?
Thank you very much. I think I'll start by following up on some of Ms. Fellow's points. If I could ask again about the makeup work. Is it on the form where the child is suspended that it shows that makeup work is to be provided by the school?
I'll go back and look at the form. I haven't seen it specific, but it is in our procedures that makeup work is to be provided, and it should be discussed with during any parent conference in terms of what the work is and how it's going to be collected and provided for the student.
Yes, because I heard that it's at the appeal level where it's reviewed, but not all the suspensions are appealed, and it seems like that's kind of after the fact. If it's done at the time of the suspension, and that's part of the form that the school has to fill out, it might be every time. Okay. And I also heard that the school counselors assist in making the procedures consistently implemented in the school. What are you doing with schools that school counselors are unlocked? So who is doing that job with schools that don't have school counselors?
For schools that don't have school counselors, as I stated earlier, that the Office of Pupil Services is ready and willing to assist schools with consultative services. I have been out to schools that don't have, I can name 3 schools specifically that don't have a professional school counselor. We have pupil personnel workers assigned to those schools as well. Some cases like 3/10 or 4/10 of their 10-day week, but they also help to support. And schools prepared a work plan to ensure that the services delivered by a counselor will still be delivered at the school.
Okay.
And so we're also working with administrators that don't have a counselor to develop an alternative counseling plan to delineate responsibilities for follow-through with certain services. And so our staff as well, our pupil personnel workers, also help facilitate some of that.
Okay. The beginning of the presentation, you talked about safe and supporting learning community. Are we using any kind of objective criteria to evaluate each one of our schools in terms of how they're doing on the safe and supporting learning community?
We utilize, we work closely with the area offices, and schools are required to, 1, develop targets around discipline at the beginning of the school year, and we work with the area offices to look at disaggregated data on a quarterly basis, and then to provide targeted support to the schools that we see potential gains or issues with.
But it clearly is shown a tremendous effort and tremendous success in terms of lowering the suspension and expulsion rates, and I applaud that. Safe and supportive learning environments are really beyond just dealing with the discipline. And so my question is the broader question in terms of, are we using any criteria to evaluate how our schools are doing in that broader community environment? And those schools, have we identified schools that are really doing quite well, other schools that really need improvement, and what are we doing to address that need for improvement?
Well, when we look at a safe and supportive learning environment, as you said, it is much more than discipline.
Yes.
The focus is really on teaching and learning and the efficacy of teachers in the classrooms and the building of relationships, and really schools developing environments conducive to teaching and learning. So I don't know if one of the areas wanted to address how you monitor.
Yeah, I can see. I can't hear you, but I can see it.
Is this on? It's on. It's not captured in a specific metric like, let's say, suspension would be, but it's captured in our walkthroughs that we do in terms of our school monitoring. So, for example, what Ms. Briscoe is saying, if there's a classroom environment that doesn't seem conducive to a safe and orderliness, then that's something that we would give specific feedback to that teacher around and work with the principal around improving that specific classroom. Similarly, we would do that at the school level as well.
All right, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I just want to jump in. Because before we move to the next part of the question, there was some discussion about PBIS, and I just want to clarify that we've made some association with PBIS as it relates to discipline, because one of the things that you look at as a part of PBIS is discipline in the school, and what kinds of issues or challenges are students having, and then how do you begin to address them as a school community. So part of PBIS is the buy-in and investment of the staff to look at positive school climate and support, and also working with parents so that there's consistency in how we are interacting with students. Whether they're challenges that are happening within a school or celebrations of good things that are happening within a school as a part of PBIS. And so as we think about discipline and as we think about PBIS in a larger context of safe and supportive schools, and what are the positive things that we can champion students around that promotes positive school culture, and some of that is integrating, for example, character education, where you talk about respect and you talk about responsibility. All of those things connect in a true PBIS model, and the reason PBIS is powerful is that you use data to drive some of the actions that are taking place, so that you're looking at incidents that are happening within a classroom or a grade level, and whether they're bullying kinds of issues, and you're saying as a school community, how do we begin to address this? What's the role of students as bystanders? What's the role of students who are victims? And how do you begin to address them as a school community? So just wanted to provide that context because we're connecting a lot of PBIS to discipline, and I think that PBIS is one of the ways in which to address discipline.
Okay, thank you. In the presentation, you provided the breakdown of the 93 schools, elementary, middle, and high, who are active in PBIS. I'm wondering if you, and if you can't do it now and need to do it later, that's fine, could provide the breakdown in terms of suspensions and expulsions by elementary, middle, and high school as well.
Yes, we can provide that data for you.
Okay. Number 4. Where's number 4? Oh. How many alternative schools do we have, and how many spaces are there in each of the alternative schools? There's 2 or 3?
We currently have 4, but I'm going to defer to
4.
Mr. Barnes.
Actually, we have 5. And the enrollment generally varies about 115. The enrollment is about 115 to 120 students.
Per school?
Yes.
Per school. And so what is the accessibility for a student who has been expelled to get into the alternative school right away?
Well, a procedure was written last year by Ms. Golsom that allowed the alternative schools to enroll initially 100 slots, and the other 15 to 25 were saved, maintained for the expelled kids. So the students, if they are placed on expulsion, an application is given to them. We have narrowed that process down through the expulsion office with Mr. Price. The kids are given an application basically immediately once they receive notification they've been placed on expulsion.
Right.
And they can apply for enrollment. And generally it takes place within a matter of days.
Mr. Price looks like 11 days, is that what you said, sir?
A matter of days.
A matter of days.
A few days.
Oh, okay. Mr. Price, did you want to speak to that?
I did not, but I knew that was an issue.
I mean, I'm sorry. You looked eager.
May come, so I'm just bracing myself for the questions.
Okay. So then you're saying there is no difficulty for a student who's been expelled to get into the alternative school. There are slots available, because I've heard there have been waiting lists or challenges with that.
Trust me, with the new AP procedure that was written last summer by Ms. Golson, we have remedied that problem.
Okay. The categories for, Mr. Price, you did mention that the major categories for expelled were drugs, assault, and group fights. What are the other categories?
I did not bring the entire list, but we have...
Let me narrow my question. It might be easier. Are there any nonviolent reasons why a student would be expelled?
Yes, off the top of my head, false alarm is one. Possession alone of a weapon is one. Off the top of my head, without the full catalog before me, but those two.
Those kind of serious situations are the ones that we're talking about.
Yes. And I'm sorry.
No, sir. Go ahead.
No, and I just wanted to mention one point with respect to alternatives. The Office of Appeals utilizes what we have rendered alternative educational services for students that are proposed for expulsion that we decide that do not necessarily warrant an expulsion but a long-term suspension. And in that process, they are coordinated with the Office of Pupil Services, and we have, it's akin to a homeschooling program, but it's not a homeschooling program, where instructors are assigned to the students to go to the student and assist the student during the period of the long-term suspension, and the student is immediately returned after the period, defined period of long-term suspension to his or her base school. And we've had no challenges whatsoever with respect to that work being turned over to the school, being graded and added to the general academic makeup of the students' coursework.
Okay. Madam Chair, I'm thinking, even though the buzzer hasn't gone off, I should keep going. I have a couple more questions.
Hit the buzzer.
I'll keep going until...
Well, it'll probably go off as soon as you start.
Yeah, I know, as soon as I do. All right. Well, let me ask this. You were helpful in offering what the categories were for expulsions.
Yes.
What are the categories for suspensions? And do they include, I'm interested not only in the categories, but in how many students are suspended for which kind of categories, and are some of those categories more subjective than others?
We can get you that
That'd be
data
great.
along with the breakdown by school level.
Yeah, I know. Okay, thank you. And I'll stop. There we go, and come back later. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Epps?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wanted to go back to the discussion about middle schools. I think that was Ms. Briscoe's point. And you were talking about the middle school team meetings and kind of the information that's gleaned from those meetings. Will there be, or is it normal process for a report to be given or to be prepared, I guess, after the end of the year or during interim points during the year to kind of share the findings with the board about, you know, kind of the climate of what's going on with children at that level?
I actually can have further conversation with Dr. Zuckerman and Mrs. Coley because schools do capture data during their quarterly PMAP, so the three of us can have conversation regarding the best way to capture that data.
I think that might be helpful because the, you know, when we have an opportunity to understand it better, then I think we could speak to that with parents in turn and may hopefully allay some concerns about middle schools and particularly the transition for schools coming out of elementary and going into middle schools. So I think that might be a helpful information to, you know, talk to and educate our parents about that particular change. My other question, and this, I ask it, but I also noticed that the data, I'm going back to the slide where you show by month the incidences of, I think, expulsion. Expulsion was slide 8. It might not have been slide 8.
Slide 8 is in-school suspensions and out-of-school and requests for expulsions.
Slide 10. Okay, yeah, let's go with 10. No, it was the one that looks colorful.
10 is
yeah, it's 11.
expulsions.
10 and 11. So I guess I'm reacting to the uptick in December, and I noticed that there was an uptick there just seems to be this uptick in December regardless. But I was wondering if we are associating, or if there was some association in the uptick this December with the heightened awareness around safety because of the Sandy Hook situation.
I would support that proposition. The Office of Appeals works in consultation with the schools. So in a few instances, principals will contact my office before they actually proceed with the recommendation or proposal. And that's some of the sentiment that I am getting from the principals, and their staff, teachers are quite concerned and threatened and maybe even heightened in terms of the threat level. But yes, I would support that proposition.
Right. So then, and then to go back to my colleague Ms. Higgins' point about the different categories of offenses, has there been or is there now a category for replicated weapons or toy weapons that resemble actual weapons?
That's already in our code and was in our code prior to the Sandy Hook incident. What, in terms of we're getting in terms of heightened requests from the schools are more so threats, and they're veiled threats. We're getting those types of situations. That is what would increase in terms of the consultations that I'm getting. But in terms of new weapons categorizations, no. Our code provides for weapons, lookalikes, and instruments used as weapons.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking, in as much as the system has engaged the public in a conversation around safety, I think that this is kind of the next chapter that we need to, around having community discussions, around these kinds of issues with regard to discipline, so that parents understand not that this is a safety issue, but that, by law, that the system has to have these things in place, and then want to educate the community about what the process is and how serious we are about implementing that, so that there is no such thing as, it was just a joke, or, kids will be kids kind of thing, that we're serious about this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Ahmed?
Thank you. I just wanted to know, for clarification purposes, is it up to an administrator to decide which disciplinary actions to execute or which alternative to execute based off of the student's actions or circumstances?
School-based determinations?
Yes. So I know in school you have a group of people and they're assigned to one administrator per group of people. Well, at least that's how it's like in Bowie High School. Like seniors, last names A through K will have one administrator, and if there's any conflict within those groups of people or within those students, that administrator is responsible to take care of it. So is it up to that administrator to determine whether or not to execute an alternative or to just go straight into suspension or expulsion? Is it up to them to decide what to do, basically?
School-based administrators must adhere to the AP 10101, which is the Code of Student Conduct, and the code has levels of offenses. So a level 1 offense would be one of the alternatives, and those are listed in the code. The most egregious offenses are level 4, and that's when an administrator requests an expulsion. So those are clearly delineated and defined in the Code of Conduct.
Okay.
And within each of those levels, there are options that administrators can use. They'll do an investigation of the incident, and they'll make the best disciplinary judgment based on the options available to them in terms of what will be the steps for a misconduct or a behavior situation.
All right. My second question was what standard would they have to use to determine the alternative? And I guess you already answered that, because if a student gets caught up in a fight or anything that would lead to violence, how do you determine that they might need peer mediation or counseling versus lunch duty or suspension? So you say that's up to the administrator to determine based off of the code.
And administrators are still looking at what is in the best interest of the student instructionally, and also in terms of how that student is going to be dealt with in terms of the behavior. So while they have that autonomy to look at the options within the levels of the code, they also do keep in mind, what is in the best interest of the school, the student, the family circumstance. So they look at a broad stroke of information before, and that's my experience with school administrators, before making just a very veiled decision.
So they use the code of conduct as a guidance, and they use their own autonomy to determine which action would be in the student's best interest.
Yeah, the code is used as the guide to help them make that determination around an infraction.
Okay, and after an investigation, but there are some mandatory referrals, and that's for a weapon or possession of drugs, that the school administrators have no leeway.
Okay.
And let me also add that there is a lot of consultation with the area offices, with the instructional directors, the associate superintendents, in terms of a principal just making sure that they are implementing the right kind of consequence for an infraction. So there's coordination with the other offices.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Beck?
Thank you. On slide 8, I understood that to be the total number of incidences, right? So it's, as you explained it, it would be the one incidence for you and the one incidence for Mr. Williams.
5 incidents.
The 5. So is this data available by student? Or by student
Yes.
number, rather?
Yes.
So that you could see what I might refer to as habitually problems? Okay. Because I'm looking at this thinking you might have the one student who is causing a lot of this, or several individual students who have 5, 6, 7 offenses that would make up the bulk of this. So I wanted to underscore to the community that the out-of-school suspension year-to-date data, 5,492, could be a handful of individual students who are not getting the proper assistance that they need to be on task. Is this data also, I'm going to assume it's available by school and by level?
Yes.
So middle and high. So how does the administration track, I assume by percentage, the individual schools so that you're aware of when we might have a problem with habitual problems in the building?
So one of the great features of SchoolMax is that staff member can export, an administrator can export the data into a template, and it can show you repeat offenders. It can tell you if you're looking for a specific day, it can tell you a specific day. That information is also accessed by the area office's performance specialists. They track that information monthly, creates red flags for the associate superintendents. That information is shared with principals. We also, at the executive cabinet level, get it on a quarterly basis. And principals' job targets are also one of the components, looks at student suspension, and each year they have to do a decrease of student suspensions from one school year to the next.
So if there is not a decrease in terms of the behavior of the student, then that affects the principal, but it just might be the population is not being supported properly.
It could very well be that situation, but it also, because we monitor it monthly, it allows the associate super or the instructional director to work with that principal to identify some alternatives and to provide strategies for students so that that does not become an issue toward the end of the school year, and so that they can closely monitor. And also look at those repeat students who have consistent problems.
So does the data at our alternative, in our alternative programs somewhat mirror the schools, or because these students are already in alternative programs, or do they have a higher incidence of
The one advantage that we have with the alternative schools is that they have a smaller number of students, and so the likelihood of them creating those infractions are a lot less than they were if they were lost in a school that had double that size. But does not say that there aren't still disciplinary infractions that are incurred at the alternative school site, and sometimes it does warrant suspension. But most of the time, because it's a smaller school site, the principal is able to work with the student and also contact the parent to say, hey, we're using this as an alternative, and we want to work with your child to find a solution to ensure that they don't get suspended.
And is there a particular grade that, we're always looking at our ninth graders because of that transition?
It's ninth.
Okay, I didn't want to label the ninth graders, but
no, we don't, but data does
we
say
have
that
heard
it's
so
ninth
much
grade.
about the ninth graders coming in and having these struggles.
And I was at a state meeting last week, and that's also the nature of the data for the state, the ninth grade suspension rate.
Do we see a difference in that where we have, like at Bowie, we have the ninth graders off-site? Is that data showing anything different?
We looked at that about 2 years ago when we did a high school presentation for the board, and the data was the same. So having it off-site did not change the dynamics of the suspension.
Right. Thank you.
Ms. Eubanks?
Thank you. Where do I begin? For student services, now, when I ask this question, so maybe I won't have to ask some of the others, is it a part of student services that would reach out to businesses and other places to get people to come in? Well, I'm just going to say this. Everyone knows that by the time your kid gets to the 5th, 6th grade, that's when your little baby is no longer your little baby anymore, because they have the drug of testosterone and estrogen that have just come in and taken away our little ones. So we all know that. Anybody as a parent, you know that. So because we know that, what are we doing as a system to circumvent by going out to different businesses, to the faith community, to whomever will, to have some type of classes? Because what they're going through, we're trying to get rid of something that is a normal part of growing. We can't get rid of it. We just have to have what we need in place to fill in the gap during those growing years. Would that be a student services, or would that be under another part of the system?
Well, part of my charge as the new chief for student services is to begin to look at resources that are both inside and outside of the system. Resources that include business community, faith-based representatives. I'm starting to meet with people within the community to talk about some of the issues that impact the community in terms of our students. And so we'll be building those partnerships with these organizations to help support what are some of the effective strategies that support our children. So that is part of my charge, to create our office to really provide that opportunity to meet with other constituents. Okay.
Okay.
But if I could just add one comment to that, please. Over here, Mr. Ultimately, that responsibility rests with the school. Once we recognize that students' behaviors do somewhat change, there are interventions that are placed for each student, or provided for each student accordingly. So it begins and rests with the school ultimately. So we like to keep the business in the school as best as we can, not to say that we are not in opposition to partnerships, but given that they are our students, we see them each and every day, it becomes a process and an expectation of the school itself to provide interventions for those students.
That answered my question, because I had that as a concern too, because as the head of a particular school, if you're in the community, you should reach out to that community, even if the community isn't reaching in. Okay, that was one question. I have, in reference to, I think on slide 19, slides 19 and 20. You have them on your long-term goal list. You have use of community resources, but you already answered the question, who seeks them out? Thank you for that. And I didn't understand what you meant by this, and what do you mean by community conferencing? I didn't understand that term. What did you mean by community conferencing?
We're trying to look at some research-based practices to assist with conflict resolution with our students. Mm-hmm. So community conferencing is a mediation strategy where trained persons go out and meet with students. It could be students and their parents. So if there was a group fight, normally you know when those two groups are at odds. So community conferencing would allow either the trained persons from student services. Many times there are persons that we can call in the community. We just called someone in the community the other day because we need a Spanish-speaking group to go out to a school, and they try to sit down and work with the students and really talk to the students about some proactive, positive strategies to resolve conflict versus engaging in physical altercations.
Exactly, thank you, because we also know that a lot of things that happen, they're brought into the school
Yes.
system. It's just stuff out in the community, but we want to make sure that we also let parents know, if you know of something that your kid is involved in or your neighbor is involved in, please call us at the school by you so that we can be proactive and not always have to be reactive to things that are going on in the neighborhood. Getting back to what I was saying about on slide 19 and 20, that was one thing about social skills lessons and parents and community stakeholders. You have them as long-term goals. Please put them on your short-term list. We need that now, like yesterday. That needs to be added to the short-term list. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Eubanks. Colleagues, I have two on the list before we go to second round. So that's Mr. Burrows and Ms. Waller.
Dr. Crawley, Ms. Frisco, you two, I want to thank you for this presentation. I'm extremely excited when I look at page 7 and I see the alternatives to suspension. I remember years past, all these alternatives were not in place, and our suspension numbers across the district were continuously rising. It might have been before PMAT was looked at as carefully as it is now, but there was a time that I remember being on the board where suspensions were out of control. So I want to thank you. I want to thank Dr. Height. I want to thank Chief Lynch for really starting this work, because without their efforts in laying the groundwork, we would not be where we are today. So I just wanted to thank you and thank them as well. And my question was almost hinted at by Ms. Beck. I really want to know what happens in ninth grade. What additional support? Because these are, I understand that these are alternatives to suspensions that we apply for all grades in all situations. But if we see a trend in data year after year that ninth graders are continuously in need of support, then I would think that we would do something different there, provide additional support. What's added, or what additional program or additional step is the administration taking to address the ninth grade syndrome, or whatever it's called?
Some of our schools have implemented a ninth grade academy so that students are placed in a cohort within that ninth grade and then are monitored through that process so that they're not caught in the sheer numbers in the amount of ninth graders that enter into a building. The other thing that we continue to have conversations with our associate superintendents is how our students our eighth graders are treated at their middle school level, because many times our middle school students are walked to their classroom, and when they get to high school, they are let off the bus and are given the opportunity to immediately find their classroom on the very first day when they get their schedule.
Right.
So we do need to have a conversation about what we do for our eighth graders even if we get into the fourth quarter of eighth grade year at our middle school level, to begin to have those conversations with our students when they're when they're in a smaller cohort at the middle school level, to assist them in transitioning at the high school level as well. And then we continue to have, in the beginning of the school year, the back to school for our ninth graders, where they go to school before all of our other students. And we've changed the format for high schools, where before it used to be where you got the schedule and you just went through your schedule so that you'd know what to do on the first day of school. And it's changed to actually looking at who do you go to if you need assistance for this, what activities and programs can you join, because we find that students who are in extracurricular activities feel some sense of ownership into a group and then are able to adapt better to the high school experience.
And to add to what Mrs. Golson just said, the transition has to begin in 8th grade. And so there's a team led by Dr. Arbogast, Mrs. Coley, that we're working on a 5-phase transition plan that would be a comprehensive plan that would start in April and go into next year, so that we can monitor students going from 8th grade to 9th grade. We looked at a lot of national research, things that work and have worked in other districts to prepare the plan, and we presented it yesterday, and we're very excited we're very excited about and hope that it yields some positive results for our incoming ninth graders.
Is there, you mentioned the ninth grade academies. Is that, I mean, are those working?
In those schools that use it, Friendly is one that's in your area, and it does. So I strongly encourage you to stop by that facility just to see it in action.
Yeah, so if it's working, what is the process in implementing a ninth grade academy in all of our schools?
Some of our schools don't do it necessarily through the ninth grade. They're now doing it through their secondary school reform academies, which also then create smaller cohorts as well. So it just varies on where they are in the implementation of their secondary school reform academy initiative.
Okay. And I just once again want to congratulate you. I remember, I mean, these numbers are not where they need to be, but they're definitely not where they were. So I want to sincerely thank the administration. Thank you, Ms. Briscoe. I know you've been involved in this for quite a while. Mr. Moody, I met Mr. Moody through, I think, was it School Store and PBIS when I was in middle school. And then when I got to ninth grade, I met Ms. Briscoe through, the student leadership group there. And so I just really want to thank you all, thank Dr. Height, thank Chief Lynch, thank the current administration for really taking us to where we need to be in this. Thanks.
Ms. Waller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As we've had this delightful discussion about expulsions, suspensions, it's tied into public safety. And then I sort of have an area that's drawn over to intervention. And this morning, it was my pleasure to hear a briefing by our security team, and I know that you all work very closely with them, and they are highly involved in this aspect of our schools and as part of our teamwork. And as part of this intervention, even when we think about the ninth graders, eighth graders, or whatever, we do have community organizations out there. I know they mentioned this morning, and I'm familiar with the CPAC. Yes. And through this intervention, the parents are involved with the students. It's a requirement. And if only we could have more of these types of organizations in every area of the county, it would be great, but we don't. But it's this type of effort I know that you all are looking to engage in with our business community, and I think that it's great. But I just had to put that out there, that when we think of the expulsion suspensions, we are talking about the public safety, but it's so great that we know that security is playing a role in this, and that we are being proactive in the safety of all of our students. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, round two. Round two, I have Ms. Fellows, Ms. Epps, and Ms. Higgins.
Yes, and thank you again. I want to refer to slide 13, of which you have the number of suspensions by gender. Although, as my colleague, Mr. Burrows, said, there has been some improvements, we still have to be somewhat alarmed that we still have a number of males being suspended, whether it be in school and or out of school, at exorbitant rates, as well as I'm pretty sure you have the breakout as far as race, age, and classroom. Race, age, and grade. One of my questions is looking at the infractions of these individuals or these cohorts of students, and what are some of the models that we're looking at to decrease the suspension level, specifically among males, specifically African-American males. I'm not quite sure about the Latino numbers, but African-American males and their suspension rates. So what are we looking at specifically around methodologies and instruction in the classroom? Where is these infractions happening? Is it happening in the classroom? Are we looking at epistemology, which is the relationships between teachers, relationships between those students, and how they are working with individuals, adults, in the classroom? So what are we looking at as far as the trends? What are we looking at as far as intervention, and also decreasing those numbers for specific cohorts, specifically African-American males, in these suspension rates?
I think we're beginning to look at those specific groups that stand out, particularly males, African American males. Of course, we are a majority minority district, so the proportional number of black males are going to be significantly higher than any other group. But we are beginning to have these conversations around, and that's perhaps why we shared this particular chart, because it is a significant indication of we have some focused, targeted kinds of interventions we've got to put in place. And so we're beginning to have these conversations around what are the models that are out there that are specific to supporting specific groups of kids. I know in past years and other places I've been, we've looked at, or systems have looked at all-male classrooms. They've looked at race-specific classrooms for males or other kinds of interventions. And so we may examine, what are some of the best practices out there around specific groups and start to pull together in our conversations as an executive staff and also in working with schools and the associate superintendents, what are the real issues that we need to focus in on for particular groups of students, and then how do we pull together the strategies that will impact change among those groups. So from a very broad perspective, we're starting to look at that. In terms of specific interventions, again, I'll yield to Dr. Crawley.
Sure. Just to jump in sort of looking at this issue, and it certainly bears out in our data, and that data set actually is consistent with what we're seeing nationally in terms of suspension, discipline rates by gender and by race. And as I said earlier, the impetus for a lot of the work at the state level has been the disproportionate numbers as it relates to suspension by race. If we look at some of the research around effective practices, there are a couple of things, and one of them we've had some discussion around, and that's smaller learning environments. Cohorts work well. There are a number of districts that have male cohort groups where you have opportunities to support students academically and providing social emotional supports to students around good decision making and engagement within school, because what we find is the higher the level of engagement, the less likely students are to engage in inappropriate behaviors. So cohorts make a difference. Mentoring opportunities for students makes a difference, and a lot of that mentoring, to be most effective, happens in the earlier grades so that students develop those resiliency skills, and they're less likely to engage in inappropriate behaviors. But I would point to mentoring opportunities for students, which is something that we continue to look at in this district, and we have a number of organizations who provide that support to us. Counseling support around good decision making, which is why it's important to have a strong student services team available within schools to support students. And then the final is the professional development of staff in working with students and really looking at what happens in terms of relationships, delivery of instruction, de-escalation of potentially inappropriate situations where sometimes if you intervene at a certain level, it's less likely that the behavior will lead to something that leads to suspension. So part of that is really looking at teachers and looking at where you have higher suspension rates or disciplinary issues, looking at where things are happening within buildings, if things are happening in the cafeteria, or if they're happening in the hallway. How do you intervene so that you don't have acts escalate to a situation that leads to harmful behaviors or suspendable acts? So I would say to you, as a district, we're going to continue to look at all of these issues. Ms. Coley talked about supporting the schools and making sure that we're making those good decisions and we have those viable programs within schools. And I would say to you that, as Ms. Epps indicated, that these are community conversations as well to raise awareness of our data, some of our challenges, and ways in which we can engage all of our stakeholders around this issue, because there are events that happen in the community that filter into the school and then leads to a disciplinary act. And so part of that is all of us working together, our teachers, our security team, our community partners, our mentors, to make sure that we can provide a system of support, that we are truly wrapping around these kids and making sure that they're safe. And then I would suggest again that a lot of that work starts at elementary, then to middle school, and then the difficult transition that some of our students have from going to from a middle school learning environment to a much larger environment.
Thank you.
Ms. Epps?
Thank you. I was, you know, in as much as we're sitting here having a conversation about discipline issues and just to something that Dr. Crawley said, it just occurred to me that this is the exact kind of thing when we start to spill over into issues that really are community issues that manifest themselves in the schools, then you get into what the county executive has been talking about in terms of his neighborhood initiatives, because it speaks directly to that. And so I'm wondering, is there a representative from the county executive's office with us today? And to the extent that there isn't, that's unfortunate, because I think that their input and in this discussion is key to the very thing that he's trying to do. So hopefully, I do hope that as we continue to roll out the conversation around discipline issues, that we'll maybe have to issue a special invitation to the county executive's education liaison in that office, and also the Office of Constituent Services, to discuss these matters, because as one county and on behalf of our children. I just wanted to make that comment. My question is to go back to kind of the recognition. Thank you, Ms. Eubanks, for the understanding and helping parents to better understand the change that happens biologically with young people, which then affect their ability to concentrate, and they have all this pent-up energy and they don't know what to do with it. I think that, again, the opportunity for partnership with the medical community would be really helpful as we roll out education campaigns around those changes as well. And I know, Children's Hospital has a wonderful reputation in terms of understanding development and stuff like that. So maybe that's, if to the extent that it hasn't already been done, and I'm sure you probably already have to a certain degree, but I was just wondering about those efforts.
We are having our first meeting with the local care team tomorrow, and that care team consists of representatives from Health Services, DJS, Department of Social Services, Department of Family Services, and they reached out to Chief Williams and Student Services to actually talk about how we collectively can provide wraparound services to our students and families, and so they're looking to us to make suggestions to them. So that's a great suggestion. We talked to schools about adolescent development and the need, when we were participating in the middle school task force, the need for teachers to understand the developmental milestones and developmental changes in students. But it's also important for us to ensure that parents understand as well, and how they can support our efforts at home.
And to go back to your comment about the Transforming Neighborhoods initiative, there are a number of us who are actively participating in the meetings with those 6 neighborhood groups, and there's representation from mental health, from social services, from the county exec's office, school district. So we're all a part of a team that's looking at how we best serve students that are a part of not only our school circumstances, but those spillover situations in the community. So we are an active partner within the scope of those programs.
Right.
And Ms. Epps, in terms of the structure, just to follow up with Mr. Williams, I had a meeting this week with Betty Hager-Francis from the county exec's office to talk about how we plan together in the T&I initiative. And so we had a really good conversation about some of these topics that we're talking about today and how we work together. And as Mr. Williams said, at the executive cabinet level, there are at least 4 members who are participating, and then at the local level, there are principals and others that are participating in that process. So we are well represented in this initiative.
Right. I guess I've just, one of the things that this administration does very well is this connection to the community and educating the community about these kinds of initiatives. So as you roll out a timeline, I'm just looking forward to, you know, the implementation or the development of those kinds of things. My last question goes back to the conversation about the code of conduct and also the orientation that takes place, I guess, in the summer. In terms of making parents and almost, you know, doing a sit down, is there an opportunity for parents to actually sit down and go through line by line the code of conduct so that they're well aware of what their students, the standards that their students will be held to?
They're provided the code of student conduct. We don't require that they sit there and read it right then, but we also give a shortened version of that code that the student and the parent must sign at the beginning of each school year. Okay. With the list of expellable offenses and offenses that require suspension.
Again, I think there's an opportunity for a broader conversation and, you know, and educating, because they have to. A lot of parents are just trying to figure out what's going on with their children too. So, thank you.
As I go to Ms. Higgins, for the record, I think my son is exempt from that whole discussion we've been having. I hope. No, not likely. Okay.
I think he was the cause.
I'll try.
I just wanted to offer a suggestion. Years ago, my office worked with one of the local schools with incoming ninth graders who were truant. And what the school did was separate the ninth grade class into 4 groups and identified a staff person to take 1/4 of their students. And that person was responsible to call the parent for any child who was not in school. And what that did was formed a relationship right away with the parent, the new parent for the new student. And it also then got students coming running in, and they knew somebody in the school saying, I'm here, don't call my mother. So, I mean, it formed all sorts of ancillary kinds of relationships that might also be helpful. And I know the schools are very, very busy, and I know what I'm saying, but the fact that those new students had one person they knew had connection with their family made a difference.
And we've seen that work in schools, in large comprehensive high schools, where the students are assigned to an individual. They build those relationships. They have a trusting adult to go to and someone who will follow up. So we'll be certainly taking that suggestion and trying to create something very similar.
Well, and this just was actually administrative staff whose task was to do the true, absences, and it developed relationships. So, can we talk about how we integrate the suspended or expelled students back into our schools?
I'm going to have the pupil personnel workers meet with the students who were on long-term suspension to assist with the re-entry. And we also established a new protocol last year called the Expulsion Review Board, the ERB. And I'm going to have Mr. Price explain that in further detail of how we help to transition our expelled students back into the regular program.
Okay. And then I'll have one more question after this one. Thank you. So if you would be 2.5 minutes, the chair is on a tight leash.
Sure.
Thank you.
Our Expulsion Review Committee, once the student has been expelled and referred to the alternative school, the home school PPW maintains communication and contact with that parent and family throughout the period of expulsion. Up until approximately 45 days, or between 45 and 30 days before the expulsion period ends, we send out an invitation to the parent to come for them to come into the office for what we call the expulsion review board. At that time, we have a discussion with the student and parent in terms of what activities have occurred during the expulsion period, especially if the student has not been enrolled in one of the alternative programs. And then the expulsion review board will take that information into consideration and then have a discussion in terms of what would be the best placement for the student upon his or her return. And so there are many different factors that go into it. If the student has an IEP, if the student was expelled for a group fight, we don't wish to return all those students back to that same home school. If there was an expulsion for an act of violence and the victim or the staff member is still at that original school, we don't like to send the student back to that environment.
Let me interrupt Mr. Price because she's going to be tough. My question really has to do with what is the connection? Let's say they're going to school A. What connection is made on behalf of the student to integrate that child back into school A, even if it's a different school? What connection with the staff at that school who's taken that student on?
Well, at the ERB conference, we have the original PPW from the home school, and if it's not going to be the home school, that PPW would transition material information to the PPW for the new school. And so that new school PPW is a caseworker, if you will, for the students' transition back to school.
So is it information, or is there a meeting so that the school who is receiving the child is prepared so that it's to the best possible option of having it a smooth transition?
It's both.
Okay.
Far is that the answer you want? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. And my last question, Mr. Williams, has to do with your recommendations. These recommendations, they don't seem to necessarily have timelines on them or measurements. Are they things that are currently being implemented, or are there things that are on a wish list? How should we conclude your recommendations?
The recommendations are being flushed out, and we'll put timelines to them for Dr. Crawley and the Exec Cabinet to look at. Short term are probably things we are looking at for this current school year. Long term, as we look at the revisions in the Code of Conduct, both state and local, we'll make some time adjustments for how we implement some long-term recommendations.
So these are recommendations that are actually being implemented.
They're actually being
in process.
They're actually being worked on by the Division of Student Services.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, Ms. Briscoe, and Mr. Price for your presentation. Yield to you, Dr. Crawley.
We'll move on. So we'll move to our consent agenda items. And we have items 7.1, 7.2, and 7.04 before the board for approval of major renovations and additions, approval of educational specifications at Clinton Grove Elementary School, a proclamation commemorating Mathematics Awareness Month in Prince George's County Public Schools on April 2013, an MOU for the box office project at Bowie Center for Performing Arts.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Crawley. That's 7.1, 2, and 4. Ms. Fellows.
Yes, I just make sure I understand this. 7.1 and 7.4, do these have any kind of budget implications? Because if so, as the chair had indicated on our last session, if these can be tabled to place in CIP FAB for extensive discussions on them, specifically I was looking at the Memorandum of Understanding for Box Office Project at Bowie Center. I would like more information about that because I would like to see if that can be duplicated across, say for instance, at Suitland High School or something like that. So I would like to have further discussion about that not during this time frame. But if those two, if I can put forth the motion, if that's appropriate, to table those for CIP FAB.
I'm going to ask Ms. Golson to just provide some comments in reference to those two items.
So for 7.1, it's just to do the ed spec, so it does not require funding for Clinton Grove.
Say that again, Ms.
7.1
okay.
is just approval to do the ed specs, so to change it from a K-6 ed specs to K-5 does not require additional funding at this time. If we look at the Bravo box office, that box office improvement for Bowie Center Performing Arts It's co-owned in conjunction with Maryland National Park and Planning, and they will take care of the cost for the construction piece. What we are offering, what we would be accountable for services on our end, will be just the design work and ensuring that the Bravo follows the correct process for acquiring a contractor based on the lowest bidded process that we currently use.
So we won't have to pay for the design process?
Well, we're using our current staff, but it wouldn't require additional funding.
And I think it might be helpful to, there is history on how this came about, so, because it's been there for a while, so maybe get that, because we actually had this on the agenda a while ago.
In October.
But also, in terms of how we got here, it might be helpful for Ms. Fellows from a duplication perspective, because it was a collaboration long before our time, but it was a collaboration that happened, and it actually, the community tends to enjoy it. They have different programs that happen. Some are school-based, and then some are just from the community. So make sure, what I guess I'm getting at is that information that would help her understand how maybe something like that could happen in that community.
Sure, I'll provide the memorandum of understanding between both communities.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you so much. Ms. Epps, you had a question?
Can I have one too?
It'll be sent to all of the board members.
Thank you.
We'll just go ahead and include it in the Friday packet to the board.
Okay. All right. With that, colleagues, I entertain a motion.
I move to accept consent agenda 7.1, 7.2, and 7.4.
Thank you, Ms. Foster.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second to approve consent agenda items 7.1, 7.2, and 7.4. Ms. Thompson, call the roll, please.
Mr. Barrows? Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
I'm abstaining until I get the documents. Thank you.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller?
Aye.
Ms. Ahmed?
Aye.
Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Mrs. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Budget.
We'll move on to budget consent items. Items 8.01 to 8.07 are before the board for approval of Parkdale High School Science Renovation Project, E-rate wireless service contract, E-rate hosted voice over Internet protocol for local and long-distance service, E-rate installation and report of local area networks contract, managed wide area network service contract, Verizon local services contract, and AT&T long-distance service contract.
Thank you, Dr. Carley. Ms. Fellows?
Just like I stated in in my concern, and as I indicated when the chair had indicated in our last board meeting that these budget items should be fleshed out in our CIP FAB meetings, because I have many questions regarding that since I don't have the contracts in front of me. And so therefore, I'm going to ask my colleagues if we can table these for CIP FAB so we can further or have a further discussion on these in CIP FAB, if that's something that we can do. Because they have budget implication, as well as I indicated, the contracts are not on the documents that I have.
Ms. Jacobs, the E-rate contracts, we follow the federal government's guidelines, and these, the first three, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, have been put out to bid, competitively bid through the school district's processes, and follow the E-rate guidelines that we, in order to apply for these services. These, we have to keep the bids out for 28 days. We go through a rigorous evaluation of the bids, and when they're completed, we have a certain time period to award these and submit our E-rate applications. Our E-rate applications are due on March the 14th. So that, you know, we are under an aggressive timeline, and it's basically we start this this paperwork around the January time frame. We have to put the bid out for 28 days. All school districts that apply for E-rate have these specifications that they have to do. And in this case, these three, we went out to bid because we anticipate utilizing these services. These are services that we use every year. These are monthly services for telecommunications and internet services.
Was there opportunity to have any discussions on each one that I have a concern with?
You mean now?
Yes.
Yeah, so, I just because I don't have the agenda in front of me, and maybe but just because we've been dealing with E-rate for so long, that I thought we did discuss these at the CIP FAB, but maybe not, maybe not the specific ones, because I know we did cancel one.
I thought we did as well, in addition to at least mentioning it during the budget work sessions when we were talked about wireless
I do remember
infrastructure.
that. Maybe that's where my mind is thinking, but because we had this
Budget work session.
Yeah, I knew it was somewhere that we actually discussed these, which was the budget work session. But what I would like for you to do, if you can, if you would go through each one and just explain again what the background is and what's involved.
Will questions be allowed if we have concern? Thank you.
Okay. The first contract for 8.2 is the E-rate wireless service contract. Basically, this covers our cellular phones and our data services for our Wallace Grant iPads. This is a 3-year contract with an option to renew 2 one-year renewals. This contract, if awarded, it will have a 75% discount rate on the numbers that you see. So if that number was $500,000, for example, we expected to spend $500,000. When we're awarded E-rate Priority 1 services, we would pay 25% of that $500,000. Okay, so it's a discounted service. It's a program that the federal government has been doing for about 13, 14 years.
This is a multi-year contract, correct?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
Is this a contract being funded out of operating funds?
Yes, it is, ma'am.
And will this contract die on June 30th, 2013?
Excuse me?
Will it die on June 30th or
So this contract is for next school year. I'm sorry, let me make this clear. Each one of these contracts becomes effective July 1. These are contracts that will become effective in July. And in this case, this is a 3-year contract with 2 one-year renewals. So in essence, this could be potentially a 5-year contract.
It's a 2-year, say that one more time?
2 one-year renewals. So we have the option to renew after our third year. We have the option to renew for 2 additional years.
Is there anything prohibiting me from seeing the contract before voting? Can I see the contract before voting? And that includes all, because I like to see it before.
I think we can arrange that, yes, ma'am.
And also the bid for each one of the contract, the bid process for the bid for them. Okay.
We follow the guidelines. The board policy is number, 0124. That's the policy we follow for E-rate contracts. And we follow Administrative Procedure 0709 is the administrative procedure that we follow. These guidelines are basically the same as the USAC guidelines on the E-rate website.
Because I noticed in the E-rate on IFB 037 E-rate hosted, it does provide, the budget implications and the time period, so that's helpful. It doesn't say that on all the board summaries.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. On the second one, the E-rate hosted voice over Internet protocol for local and long distance. This is a contract. It's a 3-year contract with 2 one-year renewals. This contract would be a new phone system for the school district. This would take us approximately 18 months to 2 years to implement. So we would be utilizing the old phone system and the new phone system as we move through these next 2 years. Okay, so part of our phone bills will be paid on our old contract, which I'll get to in a minute. It's also listed here. This would be again, this is a Priority 1 service, so the number that you see there, we would receive a 75% discount rate if awarded for that E-rate purpose. Okay. The third contract is the installation and repair of local area networks contract. This one, as you'll notice, this one has a 90% discount rate, and that's because we're focused on specific schools in the district. There are, the discount rate is based upon the free and reduced lunch meals forms, and the schools that have those highest the highest discount rates, we focus on those areas with the potential of being awarded for the installation of networks. So practically every year we try to apply for grants and opportunities to raise funds for these type of work, which is, these can be very expensive. This is approximately, in this area here, we traditionally have about $150,000 to $200,000 worth of repairs on our network annually. And again, if we spend $150,000, we would only spend, we would have a 90% discount for these type of repairs or this type of installation, if you would.
A question for this one is, why is the figure of 50,000, or how did you arrive at the 50,000 figure for each vendor? We've been doing this for about 14 years, ma'am, and our average repair bills, if you will, throughout the last 10, 15 years have been on average for the network type repairs have been about $150,000. Okay, and that's how we arrive at those. And the timetable for this contract is also too?
This one is, again, this is a 3-year contract with the option of 2 one-year renewals. Okay. The fourth one is a managed wide area network service contract. Basically, this contract provides the high-speed data services that we utilize for our schools. It provides the internet access and the data services we need, the throughput we need for the schools. This contract is basically a 1-year contract with the option for 2 one-year renewals. Okay, so this is not a 3-year contract. This is a 1-year contract with the option of 2 one-year renewals. And this is a Priority 1 service. It's a 75% discount rate. This contract is about, we normally spend about $2.4 million a year on this, and we would receive a 75% discount on those rates. Okay. The 5th contract is the Verizon local service contract. As I mentioned earlier, we have a bid. We've awarded a bid to a contractor for a new phone system that would cover local and long-distance service. This is a 1-year contract with the option for a 1-year renewal, this Verizon one, and we'll be utilizing both of these contracts. So some of our school system will still use the Verizon phones, and as we move to the new system, we'll take them off of the Verizon contract and put them on the new contract. As I said, because of the size of our system, that'll approximately take us 2 years to do. Okay. This again, our billing for local phone service is about $220,000 a month, and we would receive a Priority 1 service discount rate of 75%. The last contract is our long-distance service, our AT&T long-distance service. This is a State of Maryland contract. The state competitively bid this contract out. It's a 1-year contract with the option for a 1-year renewal. And again, the new phone system would replace this. As we move to the new phone system, it would replace the AT&T contract as well. Okay, and this is this is a Priority 1 service. We spend, I think it's approximately $120,000 for long distance, so it would be a 75% discount from that $120,000. Okay.
Thank you for the information.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
again, you know, it's for me, I'm not quite sure. I don't want to speak for others. I'd just like to have these documents running the contract bidding process before making any kind of decision.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. I'll make sure that you get those.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wes. Also just wanted to just go back to the first one, just for the record. The Wallace Grant iPads are going to be paid for through the Wallace Grant.
That is correct. So the billing for the iPads is paid out of grant funds. And thank you. I did say operating. I apologize for that.
Okay, colleagues, I'm going to recognize Mr. Burrows and Ms. Epps, but let me just say this. We have a board policy that speaks specifically to, and state law, that speaks specifically to what items are allowed on the consent agenda. And what I strongly encourage is that if you have questions about consent items, that you send them ahead of time, because if it's going to, it takes away the purpose of consent. So if we're not going to be able to consent to a consent agenda items, then I will need to know if we need to have a work session on those items, if we need to have further discussion on the items, specifically so that staff can be prepared and know that there may be something other than that. I'm not suggesting that questions can't be asked. I'm just saying that from a process perspective and from a board meeting perspective, consent agenda items are called consent for a reason. So clearly, if we can't, if it's not consent, then we need to have further discussion and get additional information. But I strongly encourage that we send those ahead of time so that staff can get the information. And then if there's a question, or if you feel that you haven't gotten the information still to either vote for, against, or not at all, then we can talk about that. But at least it would also help me in adjusting the agenda so that consent can be truly consent. So I recognize Ms. Epps and Mr. Burrows.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really quick question. How we're, excuse me, Mr. Watts, how we're implementing two contracts, like as one rolls off and the other one, is that to avoid any penalties from the older contract?
Essentially, it's to not drop a service. So if we went with one contract, we can't afford to drop all of our phones. So we're just rolling. As we implement the new one, we're pulling off the old one.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Burrows.
Dr. Crawley, I would just ask that that items, especially contracts, be placed in board docs. And I know we have a policy that says the materials for the board meeting must be placed in board docs 4 days prior. That did not occur this time. I would just ask that in the future that all documents and supporting materials are placed in their entirety on board docs 4 days before. Whenever there's a contract, I see what's in board docs, it seems sufficient, but if you could just add the actual contract on there as well. Thanks.
Is there a motion?
Madam Chair, I make a motion that we accept the budget consent agenda.
Second.
It's been properly moved and second to approve the budget consent agenda. Ms. Thompson, call the roll, please.
Mr. Barrows? Mrs. Epps?
Aye.
Ms. Eubanks?
Aye.
Ms. Fellows?
No.
Ms. Higgins?
Aye.
Ms. Waller?
Aye.
Ms. Boston?
Aye.
Ms. Jacobs?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Colleagues, we don't have any, 9.0 seems quite odd now. We have no further items. We have no public comment, as I indicated earlier. We don't have first readers. However, we do have to go back to executive session. And so with that, Dr. Crawley, do you have anything further with regard to the agenda today?
No.
Okay, seeing none, we are adjourned back to executive session. Thank you.